Husband prioritized helping our new neighbor over spending time with me and our newborn, leaving me suspicious and betrayed. A few weeks ago, Beth, a woman in her 30s and a single mother with split custody, moved into our estate. My husband, Carl, 32, happens to be the chairperson of our HOA, so he often gets calls for help from the neighbors. Shortly after Beth moved in, she rang up Carl, asking for a hand mounting her TV on the wall. He went over and helped her out. No big deal, this is typical for him. A few days went by, and then her dishwasher started leaking. Again, he was over there fixing things. At first, I wasn't bothered. Carl always helps people around here, and it felt like standard neighborly kindness. But as the days passed, Beth kept finding reasons to call. It wasn't just once or twice. Suddenly, every little thing seemed to need Carl's attention, and he'd just go. At this point, I started feeling a simmer of annoyance. The timing of it all grated on me. We'd had a baby just 4 months ago, and things hadn't been great between us. I was still bleeding now and then, and my pelvis felt like it was still finding its place again post-birth. Meanwhile, Carl seemed to always have time for Beth but not nearly as much for me at home. Even our close neighbors noticed and found it strange how regularly she needed Carl's help. They weren't shy about commenting that it all seemed a little odd. Despite my growing discomfort, Carl decided we should invite Beth over for lunch to welcome her. She didn't know anyone in our estate yet, he said. The thing is, he never did this for anyone else. The lunch came around, and right away, Beth called me by the wrong name. I corrected her, and she just giggled, brushing it off. She came across as over the top, always trying to dominate the conversation, but she seemed mostly all right. A week or so later, we had a barbecue with our close neighbors, and Beth showed up again. They agreed she was fine enough, but nothing much more. Then, things started getting weirder. One day while I was at work, Beth came over to our place to say hi to Carl. He works from home, and with Beth being a teacher and schools closed, she wasn't working. But the kicker, she showed up in workout clothes. A work-from-home neighbor texted me about it, almost like a warning. I let it go, trusting Carl and the cameras in our home. The next day, the same thing happened. I mentioned I was glad Beth had found a friend, and Carl agreed, calling her a cool chick. But it didn't stop. She started popping over 4 or more times, always when I wasn't home, always in those damn workout clothes. Then I had to travel for work, a 4-day trip, and during those days, she was there nearly every single day. I checked the home cameras one night, and what do I see? Carl and Beth sitting at the table, eating together. I lost it. Carl is obsessed with gaming, always eats his dinner by his PC, and I practically have to beg him to sit at the table with me, which he does maybe 1 or 2 times a week if I'm lucky. After Beth left, I called Carl and told him that I was really uneasy about all these visits when I wasn't home. I spelled out that Beth had only visited when I was around 3 times. He apologized, said he'd set boundaries with her. I felt relieved, finally, some recognition. That was a Thursday night. But then, Friday morning, there she was again. I kept my cool, believing Carl would finally have the conversation. That Friday night, Carl and I talked calmly about it all. Things seemed settled. But then, come Monday, our baby got sick. Carl took him to the doctor and told me I needed to be home for 2 days since the baby couldn't go to baby school. Fine, I came home early Monday to take care of my son, wanting to keep things as normal as possible. That afternoon, Beth and her ex got into a conversation about some offer Carl had made for him to come over and be friendly. Strangely, Beth didn't text Carl about this chat even though I was home. She waited until Thursday morning, the next time I left the house, to show up and chat with him. That was my breaking point. I lost it. It had been a full week since I'd opened up to Carl about my discomfort, and still nothing changed. That night, I told him that if Beth came over again while I wasn't home, it would show he had zero regard for my feelings. He pushed back, wanting to stay friends with her, but I made it crystal clear, compromising meant she could come over only when I was there. The next morning, Carl said he talked to Beth. He told me she was really apologetic and genuinely wanted to be friends with me too. But, of course, she'd almost never come over when I was home. Since that conversation, it's been 2 weeks now, not a peep from her, no texts, not a single visit. Yet, Carl refuses to show me his texts with Beth. I told him this would always bug me, haunt me even if he kept hiding them. All he said was, so be it. Part of me, maybe all of me, truly thinks he was in the middle of an emotional affair, or maybe I'll never actually know. To top it all off, my closest neighbor shared a conversation she had with Carl while I was at work. Apparently, Carl admitted that I was jealous. She told him flat out she couldn't blame me, pointing out how quickly he drops everything for these women but doesn't do the same for me. He replied, "That's what my wife said," then went silent and changed the subject. All of this has left my head spinning, and I just had to get it off my chest. Update 1. I managed to see the messages between Carl and Beth. Not a single thing was sexual, not even remotely flirty. The worst thing I saw was a text from him to her at 7:30 in the morning, while he only replied to my message at 9:45, even though I'd texted him at 6:50. Honestly, that was as bad as it got, but even that stung. He doesn't know I saw those texts, and I've kept that secret to myself. A few days after all this, we had a massive fight. It was explosive and raw, and I laid it all out. I told Carl that I was seriously considering separation. I think that was the moment it hit him just how deep this had cut me. Everything is a blur, I can barely remember the words, just the fog of heartbreak and exhaustion. Since then, I've started therapy to deal with past traumas, and I'm taking antidepressants. At my last session, Carl came with me. It was eye-opening. My male psychologist said without hesitation, "She is a threat and has intentions." That seemed to finally make Carl see what I'd been feeling this whole time. Beth's behavior was not normal. Carl and I are actually doing great now. We've started to rebuild, putting the pieces back together. But what really sticks with me is what happened when I decided to send Beth a message. One last attempt to bury the hatchet and move on. Here's what I wrote. Dear Beth, I wanted to share what's been on my mind. I was genuinely glad when we first met. It felt like I'd found someone new with a similar personality, and I thought there was potential for a real friendship. But as time has passed, I've felt hurt and disrespected by some of your choices. As someone who has also experienced betrayal, I would have hoped you'd understand how it came across when you frequently visited my husband while I wasn't home, yet never came when I was there. You had opportunities to build a friendship with me too. I've just had a baby, and during such a vulnerable time it was especially difficult seeing how often you reached out to Carl for help. Certain things, like your son calling him Dada, crossed lines that made me deeply uncomfortable. I tried to brush off a lot, but when you avoided coming by during the days I was home, only to return the moment I was back at work, it became impossible to ignore. I've spoken to Carl about his role in this, but as a woman, I also expected you to recognize when enough was enough. In my position, I believe you would have felt the same way. I've acknowledged everything now and I'm moving forward. Whether it was you seeking attention or Carl enjoying it, I was willing to let things go, until both of your actions crossed into what I can only call unacceptable. She replied with a long, droning voice note, going on about how she never intended to hurt me, how she just naturally gravitates toward men, and, of course, a classic I didn't want to invade your introvert space. Then she wrapped up with, I really like you guys and hope we can still be friends. But in saying that I will respect the boundaries and your wishes. I gave her a short reply, I appreciate your message. Almost immediately she fired back, so is that a yes we can be friends? I took a breath and answered honestly, if I'm honest, I still hold a lot of resentment, mainly because what he was freely giving you, attention and effort, I was begging for and not receiving. He tried his best to reach a compromise with me, telling me that you were over one day to ask advice because you met someone at a bar and wanted his opinion if the guy is interested or not. So I received a lot of mixed stories, because I remember you saying that you're happy being single and not looking. I am working through my emotions, as I have a lot of unresolved trauma, and Carl's constant defending you left a very bad taste in my mouth. I don't know if it would be possible while we are still working on things, as this has caused a very big rift between us. I realized afterward that I'd made a mistake. Giving her the satisfaction that Carl had been defending her made her feel vindicated. Suddenly she unleashed a barrage of texts. Beth, Carl defended me because he wanted you to realize. Him and I are good friends. Beth, I don't want to be that person, but I do think you need to take a step back and also put yourself in our shoes. Beth, you have a good husband who loves you and your son and wants to build a beautiful life with you guys, but you can't allow insecurities or misunderstandings to interfere with that. Beth, work on things, that's fine, but don't push someone away that is wanting to be both your friends. Beth, take time to think. I won't push it. Beth, what I mean by this is to trust your husband. He is incredibly loyal to you. But he is a social, helpful person who gets along with women as his friends, and you need to accept that and trust that there is no ill intentions and he is genuinely just building friendships. She sent all of that in the space of 6 minutes. I almost laughed at the desperation of it. I replied, sure, I'll put myself in your shoes. Visiting a man only when his wife isn't home, constantly asking him for help with menial things around the house. I reached out to bury the hatchet. And then you spit out about I mustn't let my insecurities get in the way of someone's blatant disrespectful actions? LOL. And again, I don't care who he is friends with. Whether it's a penis or a vagina. I'm not jealous by nature, as he's had dinner with exes, we've had threesomes, and we constantly comment on women that we see in public. But when something makes me uncomfortable and I ask that the visits while I'm away stop, then I'm insecure. Thanks. She replied, no op. That's not what I am saying. I was trying to get you to understand that you have a loving and loyal husband and need to allow him to be friends with others. I did explain to you from my side why I did visit when you weren't there and still did say I will respect your boundaries moving forward but would really like to maintain our friendship. That was just it. I'd had enough. He can be friends with whoever the fuck he wants to. I didn't tell him to cut you off. I only asked that you not visit when I'm not here. That's it. If he ended the friendship, that was him. Your blatant disrespect now honestly killed any chances. I said to you that it's not a good idea now while we work on things. And you decided that your fucking opinion mattered. If I made a mistake, I would never put the blame on the other woman, blaming her insecurities and saying she must let her husband be friends with other women. Shame on you. Beth's final text, I will give you time. I was done. There's nothing to think about. You showed exactly who you are, your narcissistic need for attention led you to overstep. Whatever place you imagined you had in Carl's life doesn't exist. He even sees how disrespectful and unacceptable your behavior was. All of us have lost every ounce of respect for you. Enjoy the life you've made for yourself. And then I blocked her. Carl was absolutely appalled by her behavior. He didn't say anything to her, but he told me that cutting her off was the only sensible option. He promised to tell me if she ever texted him, but I haven't heard anything since, so I trust him. She moved out of the estate. She's vanished from our lives. Honestly, I wish I could have given her a proper send-off, a glitter bomb, maybe, or some raw fish shoved into her car vents, but life is full, work, my baby, and our healing. We're doing better. Carl finally sees how much his actions hurt me. And I'm stronger for having finally stood my ground. Could you please provide the full story or update you'd like me to rewrite? Right now, I only see a partial sentence. If you share the entire text, I can give you a rewritten, first person only, engaging version as requested. Update 2. I know I stuck my whole damn leg in my mouth, but in the heat of the moment, I just lost it. There was this rush, a mix of starting a new medication, the anger I felt that my husband wouldn't just tell her to back off, and my ridiculous determination to set a tone that I wasn't jealous, not by a mile. I see now how wrong that was, but I can't change what already happened. Things are better now between us, and we're in therapy, but I still feel this simmering resentment, especially because when she still lived in the estate, he outright refused to block her. His excuse? What if there's an emergency? I can't block a tenant. He wouldn't call her out on her behavior either, always with the same dodge, I don't want drama. And yeah, I get that he wants to avoid unnecessary conflict, and I do respect his decision. Still, I can't shake the way it hurts me. We've been together for almost 10 years, and I tell him, even now, that sometimes it just feels like he cares more about other people's emotions than mine. So I keep my head down these days, quietly spending time with my son, holding on to the happiness I do have. Whatever choices he makes from here on out, I'll deal with them as they come. Back when all of this happened, I wasn't in a good place mentally. I'm working on it, maturing, learning to control my emotions, and biting my tongue instead of lashing out when I'm upset. It's a work in progress, but at least now I know what I need to do. Update 3. I thought we were done with her. Then an email dropped into Carl's inbox from the managing agent with the subject line, "Notice of formal complaint." I was feeding our son before work, the house still dark and soft, and Carl just went white. He slid his laptop around so I could read. It was Beth. She'd lodged a complaint against him with the HOA board and managing agent, claiming retaliation, abusive position, and creating a hostile environment after she declined further personal engagement. She CC'd 2 trustees and the estate lawyer. My stomach flipped so fast I had to sit down on the kitchen floor. They called a special board meeting. I could tell how much shame Carl was carrying. More than anger, more than fear, he was embarrassed. "They're going to think I've been sleeping with half the estate," he said, half joking, half like he might throw up. He started muttering about resigning on the spot. I told him to breathe and pulled the folder I'd made during the worst of it, timestamps from the gate, our camera logs, and the entire message thread I'd had with Beth. I hate that I'd kept all of it, but when I put it on the counter, I felt steady. We weren't crazy. We walked into the boardroom that Wednesday like we were going to court. It felt like it. Beth was already there with her ex, remember, the one Carl had apparently invited over to be friendly, and a neat pile of papers. She wore a cardigan and a low ponytail, schoolteacher tidy, and it made me irrationally angry because she knew exactly how to present herself. If I hadn't lived it, I would have believed her. The managing agent ran through her complaint. Ms. X alleges that Mr. Y used his position to gain access to her home and personal life, persisted in contact after she withdrew consent, and, upon being rebuffed, denied normal HOA assistance and engaged in intimidation through his wife. The phrase "through his wife" made me heat up all over. I swallowed it. Beth spoke with this soft voice like she was reading a poem. I never wanted any trouble. Carl was just so helpful, and then it felt off. I tried to keep distance and then I was blocked and threatened. He stopped helping with issues my unit had because I wouldn't be his friend anymore. Carl looked like he was choking. He said, very simply, "I helped as a neighbor." It went too far because I didn't set boundaries. When my wife asked for those boundaries, I honored them. I haven't withheld anything HOA related. We log maintenance requests. You can check them. Then she said it. He tried to kiss me. Just like that. It sucked all the air out of the room. For a second I couldn't move. I looked at Carl and his face just broke, shock and this flash of wounded anger I haven't seen on him before. The chairperson asked the date. Beth gave a Monday. I knew that Monday because our baby had been sick and I came home early. I knew because I'd watched those cameras like a hawk back then. I pulled up the indoor camera on my phone and scrubbed through. I could feel my therapist in my head, telling me to keep my voice low and stick to specifics. "This is that Monday," I said. He didn't go over. "Also, here are the dates and times you came to our house that week. You can see I'm home in 2 of them." The managing agent took my phone, reviewed, and then asked Beth if she had anything at all to substantiate her claim. Beth's mouth did this little twist. "I didn't have my phone on me then," she said. It only got messier. Carl pulled up the maintenance log from the estate system. There was literally no request from her unit after she withdrew. He admitted, in front of everyone, that he'd blurred lines socially and he shouldn't have. He also said, I never kissed you. I never tried. I shouldn't have let you be in my house when my wife wasn't home. That was my mistake. But I didn't do what you're saying. He looked at me when he said my mistake, and I could feel how much it cost him. The board asked about intimidation through his wife. Beth produced a printout of my messages to her, the ones where I called out her behavior and told her exactly where to go. I stood by them. I told her not to come to my home when I wasn't there. I told her she'd cross lines, I said, hands flat on the table. At no point did I threaten her. I said, whatever place you imagined you had in Carl's life doesn't exist. That's not intimidation. That's a boundary. The agent read the threat all the way down to her, I'll give you time, and then my final, sharp reply. She looked up like she wanted to hand me a gold star. They adjourned to discuss. 10 minutes felt like an hour. My phone was buzzing with a work call I couldn't take. Carl was squeezing his own hands so tightly I could hear his knuckles shift. When they came back, the chairperson cleared his throat and said, we find there's no evidence of harassment, retaliation, or abusive position. We do recommend that all HOA-related assistance be routed through the managing agent and that the chair not respond to personal requests, to avoid further confusion. Beth's face did that smooth, calm blink. She nodded, stood, and left without looking at us. Carl drove us home in silence and then parked in our driveway and cried. That man never cries. I think it was relief mixed with humiliation and the sheer stupidity of it all finally spilling out. He wiped his face and said, I'm resigning. I can't do this to you again. To us. He sent his resignation that day. It was accepted that evening. I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. 2 days later, I got a DM on Instagram from a burner account with 1 follower and no posts. It was a screen recording of someone's close friend's story. Beth at a bar, drink in hand, miming blowing kisses at the camera with the caption, found a new HOA hero. Who? In the next clip, her son is in the background calling out to someone off camera, and she wrote, he does that with my friends, it's cute. That second story made my throat close up. I recognized the layout of the room she was in. It was our estate clubhouse. She wasn't gone, she was still orbiting. Before I could even decide whether to tell Carl or launch my phone into the pool, another message came in from a real account. It was her ex. I'm sorry if this is weird, he started. I saw your name on the complaint and figured out your handle through the estate group ages ago. I'm sending this because I'm tired. She does this. Makes men her projects, then plays victim. I got full access to our iPad back and found she's been saving videos like this. Use it if you need to. And if you ever hear that my boy called your husband I'm sorry. I didn't know. It won't happen again. There was a picture attached of a scribbly thank you Carl card with a little handprint on it. My heart cracked open and then knitted itself up in a completely new shape. I wrote back a simple, thanks. And then I blocked him too because I can't be anyone's dumpster anymore. Carl set up a different phone line the same day, a cheap work phone that now lives in the kitchen drawer. His personal number is personal. Everything HOA goes through the managing agent. He also sent an email to Beth through the agent that went, please direct any contact to the managing agent. I will not be engaging with you personally. It wasn't a big speech. It didn't need to be. That weekend we went to the park with our son and my closest neighbor, the one who told Carl, to his face, that she didn't blame me. We were standing by the swings when Beth walked by with 2 women I didn't recognize. She clocked me and smiled like we were at brunch. Up. I'm glad everything's cleared up, she said. No hard feelings? Like some sitcom villain. I looked at her and something in me just flattened out. I said, I told you before, there's nothing here. She tried to step closer, all confessional. I never meant to hurt you. Honestly, I thought he just needed space from a newborn. You know how men are. My neighbor, who doesn't play around, said, you should go. Beth flushed and tossed her hair and muttered, okay, Mrs. HOA, like a 12-year-old. And then she really did go. It sounds small, but it felt like a line in the sand. Not dramatic, not a fight. Just done. On Monday, an attorney letter arrived by email, one of those puffed up templates with defamation and cease and desist in bold. It accused me of damaging her reputation with false statements and demanded a written apology. I almost laughed. We sent it to a lawyer friend of Carl's who wrote back on our behalf in one paragraph, our client's statements are protected opinion based on true events supported by contemporaneous records. Further contact will be treated as harassment. Govern yourself accordingly. We haven't heard a peep since. Carl handed in the HOA laptop and the box of files, and the house felt lighter. We eat at the table now more nights than not. Sometimes it's still awkward because real life is clumsy, and we're both learning new muscles. In therapy, Carl said out loud what I think he was afraid to say. He liked being needed. He liked that he could be the hero in someone else's house when ours was full of milk and crying and my body still healing and my resentment humming like an electric fence. Hearing him say it didn't make me hate him. It made it concrete. He isn't a villain. He's my flawed, stupid, lovely husband who was a coward with boundaries until he wasn't. One last thing, because the universe can't resist irony. A week after all this, the estate trustees asked me if I'd consider serving on the board to replace Carl. We need someone who doesn't scare easy, the chair said. I laughed so hard I almost choked on my coffee. I told them I'd think about it. That night I stood in our son's room while he slept, watching the slow rise and fall of his back, and it hit me how much I'd bent myself into a shape that kept the peace. I'm not proud of everything I said. I don't love that I let a stranger take up so much space in my head. But I'm done apologizing for asking for basic respect in my own home. Whether I join the board or not, this house is my board now. My family, my rules. And if another cool chick moves in 2 doors down with a broken dishwasher and a smile that sticks too long, she can log a ticket with the managing agent like everyone else. Update 4. The trustees didn't let up. 2 days after I said I'd think about it, the chair sent me a second email with a line that made me bark out a laugh. You already do the work of a board member, you just don't get the satisfaction of voting. I read it while spoon-feeding our son yogurt and trying not to get strawberry splatters on the keyboard. Carl was leaning in the doorway, coffee in one hand, phone in the other, and he just said, do it. Not like a push. More like a shrug at the universe. At least then you get to set the rules you've been begging me to follow. I surprised myself by saying yes. They threw me into the deep end. AGM week. Our estate's WhatsApp was already foaming. Someone's dog had apparently menaced a jogger who turned out to be the security supervisor's teenage son. Someone else was insisting a gardener stole their hosepipe that was later found on their own stoop, and we had a bin fight. 3 separate posts with timestamped photos of a recycling bin put out at 10:58 when rules said 11. I put on a black dress that didn't show baby handprints and walked into the clubhouse with a pack of sticky notes like I was going to war. The room was a low hum of perfume and polo shirts. The managing agent had set out jugs of water and a stack of agendas that looked like Bibles. I was barely in my chair when she leaned over and whispered, "You don't have to speak unless you want to." That was the kindness that did me in. I wasn't going to say a word. I ended up speaking twice. We got through budget, garden contracts, a tiresome man who only referred to his house as my investment and wanted to know why the streetlights were so bright, crime deterrence, the chair said 3 times in 3 different tones. And then, inevitably, open floor. She was there. Of course she was. Hair down this time, that teacher cardigan traded for a white blouse like Innocent's iron flat. She didn't even raise her hand. She stood up and said my husband's name like we were in a courtroom and asked if the board had completed a full inquiry into the alleged abuse of power because she had new information. The managing agent looked at me. I counted to 5 in my head and then said, "Steady, we don't hear matters that have been closed and adjudicated. If you have a maintenance request or a new compliance issue, you can submit it through the agent." She laughed, small and superior. "I'll remember that when your husband comes to my door again at 7 a.m. and a sound went through the room, like a chair leg dragged over tile, like every neighbor who'd been watching had just pushed their tongue against their teeth." Carl wasn't there. He'd promised me he'd never sit in another plastic chair under those fluorescent lights again. My closest neighbor was, though. She turned in her seat and said, not loud but surgical, "We all have cameras." Beth's mouth closed on whatever she was about to say. The chair moved on. It was over in 6 minutes, but my whole back was wet with sweat by the end of it. After the meeting, in the parking lot that always smells like hot tar and eucalyptus, she tried to intercept me. "Up," she said, voice dipped in honey. Woman to woman. I didn't slow. "I told you, there's nothing here." She reached for my elbow and misjudged the distance and her nails made this tiny scratch on the clear coat of my car. It was so stupid. So small. But the action felt like a metaphor, this constant reaching. I lifted my phone and took a photo. She went pink. "Oh, come on." I didn't say anything. I emailed the photo to the managing agent before I even pulled out of the lot. I drove home with my heart thrumming like I'd sprinted, and when I opened the door, our son was on the carpet, wobbling on his hands and knees, and then, just like that, he pushed up and took 2 Frankenstein steps to my legs. I sat on the floor and cried into his hair, which smells like sun and baby shampoo in the first version of me who didn't know any of this. The next morning, my inbox had a reply. The agent had already pulled the security camera footage, watched her knock her nail against the door while she reached, and sent her a neat little invoice for the repair, as per Section 9. 3 of the rules regarding damage to common property or another resident's property. It was only the price of a manicure. It wasn't about that. It was the principle, wrapped in letterhead. Being on the board made a lot of things feel cleaner. We wrote a policy in one sitting that would have saved me months of grief. No board member or trustee to accept or respond to personal requests for assistance, all help routed to the agent. No entry into a resident's dwelling without a logged work order and another trustee present. I didn't take some petty victory lap. I just signed it and felt that click you get when a cupboard door finally sits right on its hinges again. The chair nodded at me like we just finished tightening the last bolt on a fence. It should have gone quiet. It almost did. Then, because I have apparently been assigned lesson after lesson in boundary maintenance, our estate WhatsApp lit up again with a new number that had the energy of someone typing with a glass of white wine in one hand. Question, it started, "Do we really think it's appropriate for the new trustee to police women's friendships on the estate?" She didn't use my name. She didn't have to. I didn't reply. 3 separate people did before I even put the kettle on. One of the trustees who's retired military wrote, "Policies apply to everyone, and enforcement is boringly equal. Submit your queries to the agent." Someone else said, simply, boundaries are not policing. And then my neighbor with the steel spine went in with something surgical about how the person who brings the drama into public usually isn't the one who's actually been quiet at home doing the work. The thread died. I put the kettle down untouched. A week later, the thing I'd been half expecting and fully dreading happened. A constable called me to follow up on an allegation of harassment. My throat went cold and then hot. She'd gone to the police. The constable came by our house. He removed his cap at the door. He was perhaps 22 and had a little scar above his eyebrow and despairing eyes like he'd seen too many petty fights he didn't care about. He asked to take a statement. I said yes. I pulled out my folder, timestamps from the gate, the closed complaint finding, the letter from the lawyer, the Instagram screen recordings with the .ahu caption, the letter she'd been invoiced for the scratch, and watched his shoulders go from brace to board. He took it all down. He asked if I wanted to open a countercharge. I said no. I just want to be left alone. He nodded like I'd given the only true answer there ever is. Ma'am, he said on his way out, if she contacts you directly again, call us. Don't message back. Underneath the badge and the mandate, the look he gave me was human. I closed the door and sank against it. Carl walked out with the dish towel still in his hand like a flag of surrender and just pressed his forehead to mine. I'm sorry, he said. Sometimes there isn't anything else. I thought the universe would reward my restraint. Instead, it gave me one more test. Family day at the clubhouse. Jumping castle. Face paint. The estate hired a guy with a guitar who knew exactly one song all the way through and three halves of others. It was unbearably sweet. Carl was tossing our son in the air in those little lifts that make him squeal and kick his legs, and I was talking to the chair about getting the tennis court. Lights fixed. I turned and there she was 20 meters away, side on, watching. Not moving toward us. Just watching. With her, a man I recognized from somewhere in that way you recognize a poster you've driven past every day for a year. It took me a beat. He's the contractor who quotes on everything and gets maybe a third of it. She had her hand on his arm in a way that read a stake claim. I ignored her. 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed in my back pocket. A number I didn't have saved, local code, one line, tell your husband we're done doing free favors in this estate. The spelling was hers. The cadence. I didn't reply. I handed my phone to the managing agent. She smiled this tired smile and said, I'll deal with it. By Monday, every contractor who does work on our estate had an email with the most beautiful paragraph I've ever read. In the interest of fairness and transparency, all quotes and communications must be directed through the managing agent. Any direct contact with trustees or attempts to elicit preferential treatment will result in disqualification. I printed it and stuck it inside the pantry door like a prayer. Here's the part I didn't expect. That afternoon, while our son napped and the house was the kind of quiet that makes your shoulders drop, Carl sat on the floor with his back against the couch and said, I got a job offer. A real one. Different city, remote, mostly, but with better pay and a team that isn't glued to his phone on weekends. He said, I can say no. I said, do you want to? He said, I want to not be everyone's first call except yours. And I felt something unwind in me that I didn't know had been tied up since I gave birth. We said yes. He took it. He ordered a cheap, terrible-looking cake from the grocery store and iced over good luck Carl with Boundary King. He was ridiculous. It made me laugh until my stomach flipped. The last thing, because life likes to close loops even if it's just with a piece of string. I ran into her at the supermarket in the cereal aisle. No cardigan. No white blouse. Just shorts and a t-shirt and a messy bun and a face that looked tired in a way that has nothing to do with sleep. I was choosing between two boxes because I am somehow the person now who cares about grams of sugar, and she looked at me and then looked away. Not a flinch, not a hand on my elbow, not a soft voice like a poem. She just stepped past me and took the store brand vape Bix and kept walking. I felt nothing. Not triumph. Not pity. Nothing. It was like she was a person I hadn't ever known who had once borrowed a hammer and never brought it back. I went home and put the cereal in the cupboard behind the email that says, in plain black and white, that this house runs on boundaries now. That night we ate at the table again. Our son smeared peas into his hair and Carl told me about a colleague's dog that learned to ring a bell to go outside, and we talked about teaching ours to ring a bell to eat because apparently we're that couple now. It was all so ordinary it felt like a luxury. I don't know if I'll stay on the board forever. Maybe I will. Maybe I'll resign when the tennis lights are fixed and the WhatsApp stops foaming and the bin man stops being photographed like a crime scene investigator. But the part of me that thought I had to be endlessly accommodating to be liked? She's not on any committee anymore. If another person knocks on my door when I'm not home, my husband will point them to the managing agent. And if anyone wants to know if I'm still angry, the truth is simpler. I'm busy. I'm feeding a kid who took 2 steps and now thinks he can run. I'm kissing a man who finally chooses our table over his screen. I'm sleeping like I didn't used to, even when the house is loud. The drama didn't end with a bang. It faded out, the way it always does, when the audience leaves. I left. That's the craziest, most ordinary thing I've done.